Hi, welcome to A Foreigner in the Philippines. One of the things that has come to me, it's funny, everyday things that happen, everyday messages that we get, all events all come in and they suggest things that we can talk about on video. I guess that's our job, and we are inspired to do and handle certain aspects of life that come in. Well, as you know, I've been working back on the tools and back making furniture, right? And it is a humble piece. It is only there to do functional work, but I do intend that it will look very presentable, because that's what I used to do. And actually I'm really enjoying being back on the tools, humble though they may be. I used to have a fully equipped workshop back in Fort Myers, which I could do most things, and I made some quite elaborate pieces of furniture and artwork from that little double garage studio workshop that I had. Well, if you're curious about the kind of thing that I used to make, you can actually go to my Facebook page and you can find pictures of some of my work, especially some of the furniture and other pieces that I made. So I thought that I'd talk about the problem of getting going when you're just going out there and you're faced with what the artists have always feared. An artist who works with a paintbrush, they all agree that there's nothing worse than facing that white blank piece of canvas. It paralyzes you. I always remember reading about the guy. His name was Hopper, and he was the one that made that iconic painting that showed a corner, what used to be a place that sold ice cream and sodas, and it was a rounded off corner. And then I think either he or somebody else took that painting and that idea, and they duplicated it, but they put in a lot of Hollywood movie stars. So there was Marilyn Monroe and John Wayne and let me see, just a load of other famous stars that were easily recognizable in the painting, and it was very interesting. But the artist Hopper actually used to sit paralyzed for days in trying to get going. And that first thing. Now, humble though it may be, when I was actually quite a young lad and I was drawing, and I used to, apparently it is something that paralyzes not just the multi-talented, but the humble and those of little talent at the bottom of the food chain, because it affected me. And I'd look at the white page and I just not want to spoil it. Well, what am I going to do? And then in waiting, I would look at another page that I hadn't really filled much. If you've got kids, you'll know that there's nothing a kid likes more than to get a drawing book and do a little squiggle on the first page, then turn to the next page and do another squiggle, and then turn to the third page and do another squiggle, and you end up in 5 minutes flat. You've got a sketchbook that should have been filled with beautiful drawings, and it's filled with 2-minute little squiggles and doodles. Well, I noticed that something in a space that I had left in this particular drawing, and there was space there, but it wasn't a blank page. It already had a couple of little drawings on it. So I wasn't ravaging the white page. It had already been ravaged by two other humble drawings. But I noticed that I was able to start doing a drawing, and I'm looking over at the family dog, and he was fast asleep, curled up in a ball like they do. And I started to just doodle and put the rough shape of the dog, and then gradually I forgot about doing and thinking, and I just drew. And in no time I had drawn what was for me a really good drawing of a sleeping dog. And I thought then, why couldn't I do that on the blank sheet? So I turned to the blank sheet and I tried to redo my beautiful drawing. Could I do it? Oh God, no, I couldn't. I got paralyzed again. And so during my time in art and in music, sometimes I would really want to go and practice. When I was at the School of Music at Kneller Hall, when I was in the army, I liked to really work very, very hard at playing the trombone. So it was nothing to do 10 hours of practice one way or another playing the trombone, 10 hours of practice a day. We could practice until 10 o'clock at night in practice halls that were there in the school. So I would get in there and do it. Now, when I say I was dedicated to doing that practice, I wasn't eager to start. Later, talking to a friend of mine that I was getting some coaching from, and he said he called it the pre-start syndrome. It's modern day terminology now, isn't it? We like to give everything a name that is a syndrome. Well, it worked for me and I remembered it. The pre-start syndrome. In other words, start is what we usually think of as the beginning, but prior to that, something has to happen. And pre means before the start. I used to want so badly to get in and start practicing because I had work to do, and I would be finding stuff to do. I'd brush my teeth again for the second time, or I'd have a wash, or change my shirt, or I'd find any one of a multitude of things that really needed doing. These were important things, and they really needed doing, but they weren't practice. And finally, I had to come up with a technique which I call fooling myself. And I used to fool myself. I used to make myself promises which I never intended to keep. Good ones. I would say, I'm just going to get my trombone case and put it on the bed. Now I get the trombone. Now that was something that I could do. The idea that I was going to do 4 hours practice in the evening, no, I wasn't going to do that. So all I'm going to do is just put the trombone case on the bed, and then I would say I'll just open it. Now, this may sound infantile, but when you are paralyzed in the pre-start syndrome, this is something that really does work. So gradually I'd go from putting the case on the bed, opening the case, I'm just going to clean it, I take the thing out and I polish the bell a little bit, and then say, well, maybe if I just put it together and see how the slide is working, and on it would go until finally I would say, I'll just blow one note. I promise, one note. And I would blow my one note. And then I think, well, I just blow another note, and then I'll just play one scale. I'll only play one scale. Okay, I'm talking to myself. By the way, it's all right to talk to yourself. It's when you start answering yourself that you're in trouble, okay? So, finally, I would blow one scale, and then I'd say, well, that wasn't very good, I better play it again, and I'd play the scale again, and then perhaps again and again, and then finally you reach that point, and it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter whether you are a writer, a sculptor, a plumber, a carpenter. It doesn't matter what you do. If you're suffering from starting, you will eventually, if you can get yourself into gear, you will eventually pass the warm-up stage. If you can pass the warm-up stage, you will stop thinking. And thinking is one of the deadly sins when it comes to doing anything. Don't think too much. Find something that you can do toward your goal of starting that doesn't require thinking. So finally, I would pass the warm-up stage and I'd actually start enjoying it. And now, well, I just get but I probably didn't have to fool myself anymore. I'd get my exercise book out, my tutor, put it up on the stand, and I'd start in practicing. Now, here's a thing that might be interesting for you. If you're going to do something like this, and it's not like playing the trombone, playing any musical instrument is not a one-time, one practice session thing. It's a lifetime of maintaining the skill with a certain amount of practice. And then after that, you've got development of the skill. And some of the greatest players actually had to do 4 or 5 hours in order to maintain their incredible skill. That's a good thing to remember. So how do you help yourself to overcome the pre-start syndrome for the next day, which it's going to be back? You are in battle against a dragon that will slay you every time if you don't have a plan. Okay, so you have to have a plan of attack. Now, one of the things, if I had an exercise and it was 1-page exercise for the trombone, say, and I needed to do 2 pages, so I'd have to do exercise 1 and exercise 2 in order to meet the approval of my teacher the next day or a couple of days' time. What I used to do was, and this is not any brilliant new idea that I've come up with, this is a fairly common technique, especially in, say, writing, is that you go over the point that you've actually finished and do a little bit more on the next. So now, instead of doing 1 page or 1 chapter or 1 exercise, you actually do 1 and a bit, whatever it is. If you're, I don't know, if you're a plumber and you're putting in a kitchen or you're putting in a bathroom, you get the bath installed and the shower and everything, and then if you're knocking off and it's 5 o'clock and you're going to finish work, what would be the easy thing to do for the next week? Well, the next day you're going to come in and you're going to be shuffling your feet and trying to get started again. What you do is you start the next part of the job ahead of time, so that when you come in, you've already done something which has to be continued. The start is what's difficult. So starting is what you need to be able to handle, and the fooling yourself technique is a good one that works. Now, something that I learned from reading the letters in the letters column of a newspaper many years ago. One of the things when you're doing something that's creative, if you're wanting to write a book or want to write an article, or you're doing something that's unusual for you, and you will be facing the dragon, and the dragon is going to tell you that you're wasting your time. That's that little voice. It's a little voice, but it's a big dragon, and it will, as I say, it will kill you every time. How do you fight that? How do you fight that inner voice which is trying to invalidate what you're doing? I remember reading a letter, and it was signed. I'm not sure whether I've actually created this as the person who wrote it, or whether it really was titled "A Housewife in Sheffield." but I remember it now as a housewife in Sheffield. And this lady, a housewife in Sheffield, described how she handled being able to do good work, how she was able to strive for excellence. And what she did when she was doing something, and it wasn't some major piece of artwork, I think that she was a seamstress or a cook or something like that, and she was doing a commonplace thing that she liked to do very, very well. So she said, what I do is, as I'm working, I hear the voices of my friends, and they're saying, wow, how do you do what you do? How can you get it so good? How can it taste this good? How can it look so incredible? How did you choose those colours? And all of these imaginary friends, well, they weren't imaginary friends, they were real friends, but they were in an imaginary moment. And she would hear all of this. And of course, in order to deserve all of this praise, she found that she did better and better and better work. So, I always used to use this. And when I was doing a piece of work, I would make it so that I heard people saying, I don't know how you can do this. And I guess many people will have different ideas about this. Oh, well, you're just patting yourself on the back and getting all big-headed, aren't you? And then there'll be others are saying, well, you're just psyching yourself up, aren't you? Let other people put the description on it that they will. For you, it is something that helps you to do better work. Now, I also described a little while ago about something that Carlos Castaneda called, from his studies with Don Juan, who was, I believe, a Mexican Indian guru. And Castaneda went to study with him. And when Castaneda was talking about people in his life that were, you know, SOBs, that he didn't like, that they were putting him down all the time, all of this, Don Juan listened to him for a little while, and then he said to him, you should be grateful for these people. They are your petty tyrants. It sounds good, doesn't it? These are your petty tyrants. In other words, they're tyrants, but actually they're petty. Now, the skill is, how do you deal with them? Because with tyrants, petty or not, they become part of your thinking process. And if you don't learn to handle them well, they will destroy you. They'll stop you from doing what you love doing. And this has been the case in many, many different ways for many people. So, what you need is to be able to get past those people. Now, usually petty tyrants are those who are super critics, and they will criticize everything that you do. I remember when I was in Fort Myers, I invited a friend stopped by who was actually a talented artist, and he came and he looked at a piece that I was doing, and he looked at it. Now, you can go and look at this piece of work on my Facebook page, and it is one of the Amazon warriors. So it is a female, well, Amazon warrior it would be, wouldn't it? Go and look at it. And I put a lot of work into that, and it was a stunning piece. He pointed out one tiny thing that was 1/8 of an inch out, where two lines converged into a third one going down, so like the letter Y, like this. And at that point, instead of being perfectly on, it was this tiny bit out. That's all. Look at what 1/8 of an inch is. He was, or would have been, had I kept him in my life, he would have been a petty tyrant. Now, I also told you about a company that I work for called Modern Props, and their boss was a petty tyrant for me. But according to Carlos Castaneda and his guru, Don Juan, I was about to tell the guy, why don't you stick it up your rear end and volunteer to help him to do it on rather a large piece of furniture that I'd made, a console. And I didn't, and I've said this story before. I thought, if I can win the approval of this man, the standard of my work would have increased tremendously. So I said nothing. I let him criticize, and then his two right-hand men, well, I guess it would be right and left-hand men, wouldn't it? They said, look, this is going to be a great piece. And they won him over, and he said, okay, we'll give Tyrants a try. I ended up doing 11 of those pieces, and when I finally went to him, when I delivered the 11th piece, he said, I have to be honest, I didn't think you could do it, but I couldn't be more pleased. Whew, that was like an actor winning the Oscars from this man who wasn't, he didn't go around throwing compliments out, okay? So, by using the critic, you can actually improve beyond belief, because they are people that don't want to be proved wrong. And if you have to make them admit that, damn it, you did good, then you will have gained tremendously. I hope it helps to think that you can overcome these things. You can overcome these setbacks. Personally, another thing that works for me, in closing, in the workshop, I did get to a point in Fort Myers where I almost couldn't bear to go into the workshop. It was so difficult for me, and yet I loved the work that I was doing. So what I did what most workers would recommend against. Most guys who are good workers and tidy and clean and organized, at the end of the day they sweep the workshop, get it all clean and all ready for the next day. What I found was, when I came in the morning, I worked best if there was something that had to be done that I could do that didn't require any thinking at all. So I used to leave the workshop dirty, and first thing in the morning I would go up and I'd just sweep the workshop. It was easy. I didn't have to create anything. It didn't hurt. And so I always cleaned up first thing in the morning, and it worked for me. Find something that works for you. This is a foreigner in the Philippines. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being with me. I hope you have found something that is of use to you. Bye for now. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe and share.